New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
New Thought Media Network proudly presents a weekly exploration of various spiritual practices with renowned spiritual authors, coaches, teachers, and Dr. Tracy Brown, RScP.
And now, here's Tracy.
Hey everybody, Tracy Brown here. And it is Poetry, Prayer, and Practice. Once again, we get to look at, think about, and dive into the way that poetry can inspire us, the way that prayer can expand us, and the ways that all of our spiritual practices contribute to living a life each one of us can love. And I love really focusing on some of the spiritual practices that maybe we don't think about so much or that we consciously commit to, or how to use the spiritual practices that you are very familiar with in different ways. And so today on Poetry, Prayer, and Practice, we're going to dive into a spiritual principle that shows up in many different faith traditions, labeled a little differently. And isn't that what we do in New Thought anyway? We take ancient wisdom and apply it to contemporary life. And just by thinking about it in a different way and recognizing how we can best utilize it, best conform to it, best be in alignment with the ancient wisdom or the timeless wisdom that has proven to be true over generations and generations and generations. So today I've chosen to focus on the law of growth. What is the law of growth? Well, we're going to dive into that, and we're going to have the opportunity to think about what are different ways that we want to grow in our lives and how can we support ourselves in doing that. So before I give you a lot of mental information to process, I think we'll start with 10 affirmations. Affirmations that reflect a commitment and an understanding, a commitment to and an understanding of the law of growth, just to get you thinking about what the law of growth might be and how you might be able to describe it. So, 10 affirmations about growth. if you noticed a pattern with those 10 affirmations that reminded you, I hope, that growth is natural, that growth is happening all the time, that I love that one affirmation. I remember that the opposite of growth is death. So it's like, as long as we are living, the law of growth is operating. It is not this mystical or magical law. It is a basic principle. Now, if you're familiar with the Bible and you can think of different scripture in the Bible that reflect to increase. And in Hebrew, actually, the word increase is similar to the way that I'm going to be talking about growth today. Right? The principle of increase is natural. The principle of increase is expected. And throughout the Bible, when you see the word increase used, it is about the natural expansion of life and the natural pattern of increasing that which is good, that which is God. And in New Thought, a lot of times when we talk about increase or we talk about opulence or we talk about the law of growth, we are referring to the law of growth as described by Thomas Troward. And Thomas Troward did a really beautiful scientific or logical explanation of the natural pattern or the natural principle of growth. So let's dive into that a little bit. So I'm going to read some excerpts from the chapter titled The Law of Growth in Thomas Troward's Edinburgh Lectures on Mental Science. And if you're not familiar with Thomas Troward, then what you might find helpful as a context is that Thomas Troward was a judge, a lawyer, a judge. He was English. He spent a lot of his career in India, and but he was English, and he took a very linear and logical approach, and is known for being able to talk about and teach spiritual principle by laying it out in a linear, logical, matter-of-fact kind of way. And so this is what Troward had to say about the law of growth. A correct understanding of the law of growth is of the highest importance to the student of mental science. The great fact to be realized regarding nature is that it is natural. We may pervert the order of nature, but it will prevail in the long run. In the beginning, the middle, and the end of the law of nature, there is the principle of growth from a vitality inherent in the entity itself. End quote. So right there, Troward reminds us that everything that has been created by the Creator has an inherent vitality. There is a pattern for its growth that is already implanted in it, and that is what will happen if it is not interrupted by something we do or say, and as long as it is exposed to that which nurtures that inherent way of being. But I love that earlier in that paragraph, he says, even if we pervert the order of nature, it will prevail in the long run. So that inherent quality, that inherent pattern for it to grow into its best expression is already existing. I didn't do that. I didn't make it happen. It was already inherent in every form of life. So that's a really important thing to recognize from a perspective of principle, because so often we think we are the ones doing it. One of the common ways many people remember this inherent vitality that is within the entity itself is to use the example of an acorn, which already has within it everything it needs to become the oak tree. And yes, we may water it, or we may make sure it has the sun, or we may put fertilizer, but we don't do anything that like injects oak tree-ness into the acorn. It is already there. And when we can remember that example, I think it's such a popular example because it helps us to realize, oh, if that's true for the acorn, and it's true for other forms of trees, or it's true for the rose bush or the tomato seed that I plant in my garden, I may nurture it, but it is already designed to be tomatoes growing on the vine. I may also, through my actions, kill it or delay its growth because I don't nurture it, or I do things that are specifically out of alignment with that tomato becoming a tomato, or that rose bush becoming a rose bush. But it is designed already to grow to be what it can become. Back to Trower. Quote, the law is always the same, that our thought forms a spiritual prototype which, if left undisturbed, will reproduce itself in external circumstances. Repeating. The law is always the same. Our thought forms a spiritual prototype which, if left undisturbed, will reproduce itself in external circumstances. The principle of growth is that of inherent vitality in the seed itself, and the operations of the gardener have their exact analog in mental science. We do not put the self-expansive vitality into the seed, but we must sow it. And we may also, so to speak, water it by quiet, concentrated contemplation of our desire as an actually accomplished fact. So let's, end quote. So let's see how that applies, right, to our own lives. Just like the acorn has everything that is required, the pattern of becoming an oak tree already within it. Each one of us, as we have been born, have a pattern that represents the law of growth inherently within us. So physically or biologically, that's the easy part, right? That's the easy part, that when an infant is born, that infant is going to grow to be 2 years old and 4 years old and 8 years old and 25 years old and 50 years old and 80 years old. That the infant becomes the child, becomes the teenager, becomes the adult, becomes the senior citizen. That there is a biological pattern. But let's also recognize that there is an emotional, a mental, and a spiritual pattern that is evidenced as we each go through our lives, that each one of us is growing, and it makes us think. When we recognize that, it makes us think and reflect on what are we feeding ourselves? What are we nurturing? Are we nurturing the natural pattern of expression into Spirit's highest vision for us? Or are we nurturing and providing and feeding ourselves thoughts, behaviors, experiences, and actions that are not supporting the growth, that are perverting the growth, as Thomas Troward said? We may pervert the order of nature, but it will prevail in the long run. So a lot of what I think is really important around the law of growth is not only recognizing that the law of growth is operating constantly, not only recognizing that how we water and nurture the growth of our own ways of being, best ways of being, but that it's inherent within us. Inherent, natural. We didn't put it there. It is a part of who we have been created to be. Okay, so I hear myself saying that, and I know that a lot of people feel like, well, I don't really know who I've been created to be. I don't know what my purpose is in life. I feel lost, or I feel alone. Okay, so let me clarify just a little bit. So we have been created to have an experience, to live a human experience, to grow and to develop and to continue moving into our highest vision, the highest vision that we can see for ourselves, right? Spirit's desire for us, the Creator's desire for each one of us in the human experience, is that we choose who and how we want to be. And the more that we choose who and how we want to be in alignment with spiritual principle and spiritual law, right, the more fulfilled we will be in our life and in our living. But it's not like you have been implanted with a specific purpose, that this person is going to be a doctor, and this person is going to be a laborer, and this person is going to be a minister, and Tracy Brown, you are going to be a practitioner of religious science. No. The pattern is that you have everything within you to choose, right? Because you have free will to choose the direction you go. And if you don't like that direction, you can choose a different direction. And all of the choices we make are moving us into this experience of growth. That the inherent vitality is that we shall grow as we go through the experience of humanity, of being human. So for me, that is partly why affirmations are so important, because sometimes we don't know exactly what we want, but we can affirm that we are growing in a direction toward our own good. We can affirm that we are growing, that we are recognizing the law of growth in our own lives, moving toward that goodness which is inherently a part of who I am. It is at the core of who I am. And so a lot of times we think we use our spiritual practices to escape certain things that are happening. And I think that's a misuse of the real purpose of spiritual practice. For me, and in my opinion, the purpose of spiritual practice is to help us navigate what we are experiencing in our human life, in our human circumstances, good or bad. And that our spiritual practices give us the opportunity to ground ourselves in the direction that we choose for ourselves. So let's look at each one of those 10 affirmations and talk about them and think about them. And so as you are seeing the affirmations, feel free to put in the chat, like, does that resonate with you? Or how have you used that affirmation or a similar one to experience the law of growth in your own life? And right, the very first one, I am never stuck. I am always growing. The law of growth is operating in each one of our lives. What am I growing toward? I can further define or influence that. But the reality is, I'm never stuck. I am always growing. I'm always moving into the next expression. Now, I stop and breathe there because what I know is that for many of us, sometimes myself included, I forget I am always growing, even when I am not consciously choosing where I want to go or how I want to grow. I may not consciously be choosing how I want to grow. I may not consciously be choosing how I want to grow, but it's always happening. So, right, when we leave our growth to our unconscious thoughts, our subconscious beliefs, oh, sometimes that works if we have really done a good job of grounding ourselves in spiritual practice and spiritual truth. But often we just get caught up in whatever is happening in society or whatever the collective cultural messages are. And unbeknownst to us, if we don't understand the law of growth, then we are growing more of that in our lives because we are always growing. So am I growing based on the the ads that pop up in my Facebook feed? Am I growing based on what I read in the news or watch on the news online or on my TV? I am always growing. The question is, am I choosing? Am I consciously focusing on what I want in my life, how I want to be, how I want to show up in the world? So when you believe and when you recognize that everything is happening, whether you are consciously choosing it or not, and you are growing because the law of growth is working, then for me, maybe not for you, but for me, I want to be a little more conscious about that. Another reminder of the law of growth. Growth and expansion are my true essential nature. Now, it's just another way of saying, right? Just another way of saying that the inherent nature of life itself is to grow, and is to grow based on the inherent pattern, the ingrained pattern that's been placed within you by the Creator. However, what we know is with humanity, we have the option to influence that growth or the direction of that growth. So it's more important for us, right? It's extremely important for us to be intentional about the direction that we grow and the direction of our expansion. There was a point in my life, a point of time in my life where I was afraid to grow. There were actually, I can think of 3 specific times where I was consciously afraid to grow. One of those times I was afraid to grow because I was comfortable. I was very, very comfortable. And so I didn't really want to mess up a good thing, to be honest. It's like, oh, my life is good right now. Yeah. And I didn't want to grow. I was afraid to grow, afraid that changes in my life might not have me living the way that I was living, which of course it wouldn't, because I'd be changing things, but I might not be as comfortable, or I might face some challenges. Well, the reality is that we're growing whether we want to or not, right? So the fact that I was not consciously and intentionally choosing the direction of my growth, I ended up hitting a wall, and the comfort was all taken away. And I had to remember that, oh, this is growth. This is what growth is, and it can be good. Let me use spiritual principle in a positive way. I don't know, maybe some of you have found those times when you're afraid to grow, but it's because you're trying to hold on to what's easy. Another time in my life that I can remember specifically being afraid to grow, and it was when I was really younger, and I didn't know what I didn't know. And it was scary to go outside of what my parents had taught me or told me, or what teachers said were the right thing to do or the best way to go about something. And so I was clear that I wanted to grow, but I was afraid to grow in the direction that I was inwardly feeling was right for me, but it was not matching what people who I respected or people who had authority were saying. And it was really a scary time that ultimately I am proud now, looking back, that I chose to follow my inner voice and my inner direction and move beyond the fear. But I was for quite a while afraid to grow. And then the third example that came to mind when I put this affirmation up was I was afraid to grow because at this one example, because I knew for a fact it was going to be like a bomb had been dropped into my life. And it wasn't that I was so comfortable, it's just I was comfortable with the discomfort. I knew what the problems and issues were in this situation, and I was afraid that even though I knew I needed to change, it might be worse. So that fear of the unknown keeps us, right? That fear of the unknown, or that fear of offending or hurting or disregarding guidance from people we know, love, and respect. That fear of, what comes next might be worse, can make us put ourselves in a box and be afraid to grow. So the affirmation is, I am not afraid to grow. Say it with me 3 times. I am not afraid to grow. I am not afraid to grow. I am not afraid to grow. Didn't I feel good? Like, I'm not afraid to grow. Growing is my superpower, right? Growing is what brought me to here where I am right now. Growing is cool. And when I begin to think like that, all of which could be affirmations in themselves, then I can remember that every day I am growing into a better person. If I'm conscious and aware, every day I have the opportunity to grow into being a better person. The law of growth promises that. The law of growth promises that I am growing every day and the seed is already within me to grow into a better person. And keep in mind, a better person does not mean I'm a bad person who has to become a better person. I am loving and joy filled and very much an example of peace. And every day I'm growing to be even better. So we don't only use affirmations when something is broken or bad. We use affirmations to enhance the law of growth and to expand into our highest vision of ourselves. In my work, in my life, and in my relationships, I welcome opportunities for growth. Because remember, Spirit will not force us. The Creator will not force us to choose growth or the opportunities that are presented that can provide growth. We must choose it. And so I welcome those opportunities to grow in ways that are in alignment with my best and highest good. Next affirmation. When I allow myself to let go of the past, I am able to see greater potential in my future. So part of what happens with growth, right? Just like if you have a garden at your home and you tend to that garden, you pull the weeds because the weeds impede the growth of whatever it is you have planted. So there are things that may have happened in our past that are like weeds in the garden. They may not be poisonous, but they may impede or slow down the growth. And for many of us, when we get stuck on what happened in the past, assuming that's going to happen again in the future, or what happened in the past, and we don't want that to happen again, or what happened in the past, and it was really good. So I just want to stay right there and keep it right there and that good, instead of seeing the greater potential that I could be moving toward. This affirmation reminds us that the law of growth is working in our lives, and we always have the capability and the possibility of experiencing greater, that the potential for greater is always available. And I must look for it. I must accept it. I must move toward it. I must allow it. And that it's all natural. All natural. We know it's natural for plants to grow. We know it's natural for children to grow, to become teens, to become young adults, to become parents themselves. We know that growth is natural, but sometimes we have to remind ourselves, hey, me too, me too. I can grow too. And so that it's a really simple affirmation. Oh, plants grow, children grow. I can grow too. It is a part of my way of being life expressing, that life is expressing in me. Life is expressing as me. Life is expressing through me, and I am constantly growing, which means because I am growing, I am changing. And changing is good. I understand that growth requires change. So if you find yourself being afraid of growth, one of the questions is, what am I afraid to change? Or why am I afraid to change? Change is growth expressing. Are there times when the change doesn't have a positive outcome? Yes. It is just a part of the path to choosing again, choosing a different change, and moving toward your best and highest good. Because I promise you, the moment you stop growing, you are dead. Not dying, dead. Again, remember, the law of growth, the law of growth is inherent. It is ingrained. It is there. I may not be conscious and aware of it, but I am growing. So am I growing deliberately toward what I consciously choose, or am I growing unconsciously, being guided by the law of averages, cultural consciousness, the statistics of life and human experience? So the only time I stop growing is when my body dies and my soul leaves this body into its next experience. Other than that, I am always growing. And what I love about New Thought in general is that we believe that we are contributing, right, to the experience that we have, and that we are joyful and feel empowered by the responsibility to choose. So, a great affirmation is, I am happy and grateful that I am always growing. I'm not complaining about the fact that I am always growing. I am not worrying about the fact that I am always growing. I'm happy and I'm grateful that I'm always growing. And no matter what is happening right now, it is not permanent. And I get to have input into the direction that I go next as I expand my experience of this human life. So I am happy and grateful that I am always growing. And there are a couple of more that you might think of, affirmations that you might think of that remind you of the law of growth that is operating in, as, and through your life. I'm going to share with you another Thomas Troward quote, and this actually is from the Doré lectures, the Thomas Troward Doré lectures. And it is about, really, at least to me, in my interpretation, it is about and a reminder of the law of growth. My mind is a center of divine operation. The divine operation is always for expansion and fuller expression. And this means the production of something beyond what has gone before, something entirely new, not included in the past experience, though proceeding out of the past experience by an orderly sequence of growth. Therefore, since the divine cannot change its inherent nature, the nature of growth, it must operate in the same manner with me. Consequently, in my own special world, of which I am the center, it will move forward to produce new conditions, always in advance of any conditions that have gone before. That is what the law of growth is doing in my life, in your life, in all of life. So your call to action this week is to choose an area of your life where you would like to experience positive, proactive growth. Define what you would like to do differently or how you see yourself expressing in the world. It might be something concrete, like a specific relationship or a specific job or a specific experience, or it might be the expansion and expression of certain qualities or characteristics of the divine. I choose to move forward experiencing more joy in my life. Whatever you choose is right for you. So choose an area of your life where you want to nurture growth. And then two, use one of the affirmations I shared with you today about accepting and understanding the law of growth, or make up your own affirmation specifically focused on supporting the growth that you are designing or choosing. Use this affirmation or the affirmations that you write. Use it over and over and over during the next week, the next 2 weeks, and then watch to see what happens. Let me show you the affirmations one more time. Take them in and reflect on how the law of growth is working for you. So that's the law of growth. I hope this was really helpful for you to just ground yourself, maybe once again, in this idea that each one of us is always growing. My name is Tracy Brown. I hope you'll join me every Tuesday at noon Mountain Time for poetry, prayer, and practice. And in the month of March, we've got a panel coming up talking about prayer. We've got a conversation with Rev Melissa on spiritual practice and some poets from the Bouquet of Stars. Have a great week. And remember, you are always growing. Choose your path for growth.
Thanks for watching. Join us again next week. Or watch on demand at www.ntmedia.org or youtube.com/NewThoughtMedia Network. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring. Learn more at www.ntmedia.org.
On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network, come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.